dilation does not really matter. Hey mamas, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chanel. I am a working mama, and if you're here today and listening to this video, you're probably wondering if dilation even matters, what dilation is, or what's this crazy thing that people are talking about all of a sudden called station of baby. Now, what I want you to know if you don't watch the rest of this video is that dilation does not really matter. And I know that this is like big term that we always talk about. We need to make sure that we're 5 centimeters or 6 centimeters or 10 centimeters so we can push our babies out. But what our bodies will actually show us in labor is that dilation actually is not an indication of how far along we are, even though our providers or nurses or other people may utilize that number to kind of get an idea of how much we've progressed or how far along we are or how much longer we have in labor. But that's actually not true. There's a better indicator of how much more work we need to do or the type of work that we need to do in labor, and dilation does not tell us that. The station of your baby actually tells us that. So in this video, we're going to talk about dilation, what that even is, what it means, station, what that is and what it means, and why it might be beneficial for us to understand the station of baby instead of the dilation, or if we even need to know it at all. So make sure you click that thumbs up button, make sure you hit subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and of course make sure to follow me on Instagram at A Working Mama so that you can get all of the daily tips and tricks that I share for you to have a fearless and empowered natural birthing experience regardless of the birthing environment or the birthing plan that you have. Now, let's first start talking about dilation. Dilation, again, is this number somewhere from 0 to 10 that we are thinking about when it comes to labor. Some providers may even want to talk about or try to find out if you have dilated somewhere in the 37 to 40 week mark if you haven't gone into labor yet. Now, in my opinion as a doula, that does not actually matter. If you have dilated 1 or 2 centimeters in pregnancy, that does not indicate that you're going to go into labor soon, doesn't mean that your baby is going to, be delivered quickly when you're in labor, does not mean anything. It just means, hey, your cervix is starting to dilate. Wonderful. But that doesn't really tell us where baby is. That doesn't tell us when you're going to go into labor. It doesn't tell us how long you're going to be in labor. None of that stuff matters. To the same point, you can get checked during labor when you actually go into labor and they can say, oh, you're 3 centimeters. That doesn't mean you have a ton of time left in labor. You could also be checked and they'll tell you you're 7 centimeters. That also doesn't mean you're almost to the end. You might be closer, maybe closer, but I've seen many women go from a 4 to a 10, me included, in 3 or less hours. And I've also seen women where it takes 6, 8, 10, 12 hours for them to get from a 7 to a 10. So really this dilation number is kind of a false indication of where we are in labor, how much longer, and I think it can really mess up our minds. So if we're understanding dilation, dilation is how open or wide your cervix gets. During labor, ideally we want it to get to 10. Of course, that is what we would call complete. And in some cases, providers may even encourage you to start pushing at that point. That isn't necessarily when you need to push. Your body will tell you when you need to push. But 10 centimeters is what everybody's going for. And yes, that is important, but there's so many other factors that matter when it comes to laboring more than the number that you're dilated. And if we want to labor effectively, that may not be the best information for us to know. Of course, you don't need to get cervical exams or vaginal exams, however you want to refer to them, at all during your labor if you want to just let your body do what it's naturally designed to do. But if you want to understand that information, you want to know, then I would encourage you to think about station. So let's talk about station. What is station? Well, station, instead of understanding how wide your cervix is dilated, you may want to better understand where your baby's at in your pelvis. Because again, you being 7 centimeters doesn't tell us where your baby is, and that doesn't tell us what you need to do with your body. So your station is actually how high above your pelvis or how low or engaged your baby is in your pelvis. Obviously, the lower your baby is, the closer your baby is to being born. So if we understand stations, we understand, okay, if baby's in a negative station, they're probably floating here. Stations will start at about a -2 when we're measuring them, okay? It's the same exact procedure or exam that is done. So when your provider is doing a cervical exam or a vaginal exam during labor, they're going to know the station of your baby. They're also going to know how dilated you are. So it may be helpful for you, if you do choose to get these exams done during labor, for you to ask them what the station of your baby is instead of the dilation, because this will help you know. It's going to start at a -2. That's like your baby's floating up here. Obviously, if your baby's floating up here, we still got a lot of work to do to get your baby to actually engage in the pelvis, right? And to descend into your birth canal and then hopefully out. When your baby is at a 0 station, that is when your baby is going to begin to rotate, okay? This is when your baby's in the mid pelvis, so their head is engaged. At this point, you're probably gonna feel more pressure. And then when your baby turns to a positive station, right? That's when baby is starting to begin to crown. That's a +1 and a +2 station. When your baby is in those stations, of course, you're feeling way more pressure, but then also we understand your baby is on his or her way out. Now, like I was saying before, when it comes to pushing, when your body or your baby gets to a +2 station, that's when your body will most likely naturally want to eject your baby and your body will start pushing on its own, which is why I say dilation doesn't matter, because there's a chance that you could be 7 centimeters or 10 centimeters, but your baby is still at a -1. That doesn't mean that you're about to be ready to push. You really don't want to start pushing until your baby's at a +2 station, because if we're pushing, we're starting to push and our baby's like up here, that's a lot of work that you need to do to try to push your baby all the way down through your pelvis, right? So it's better for us to understand stations, because there are certain things that we can do and movements that we can do, which we'll talk about in part 2 of this whole conversation. What can we actually do when we understand the station? What should our body be doing? What movements should we be doing when it comes to this conversation about stations? So understanding that we would rather know how high or how low your baby is in the pelvis, so that we can better navigate labor and make it actually shorter and more efficient, versus just sitting there or pushing your baby when it's in a negative station, right? When it comes to understanding station versus dilation, understand that they do not always simultaneously work together, meaning that you could be again at a 7, but your baby is at a -1, still kind of floating, or at a 0 station. We got to do a little bit of work to get your baby at a +1 or +2 before they should start pushing, or before you should start pushing, if you need to even push at all, because your body can do that for you if you let it go to a +2 station and do it on its own. But the same thing also applies, that you could be 4 or 5 centimeters and you can think in your mind, oh my gosh, I have so much longer to go. But in reality, you are at a 4 or 5, but your baby is at a 0 or a +1 station. So just with a little bit of movement and making a little bit of room for your baby in the pelvis, you can go from a 5 centimeter to a 10 centimeter in a matter of 30 minutes. If you open your pelvis and move in the right direction and give your baby a little bit more opportunity to push their head down and help your cervix dilate very quickly. So that's why it's really important to understand the difference between station and dilation. And ultimately, we don't actually have to be checked to understand dilation and station. And we'll talk about that as well in a future video, to understand what can we do when it comes to actually understanding the station. If you do know the number, how should you move your body to make it more efficient? And then also, how can we know where our baby is in the pelvis without getting these sort of invasive cervical exams? So that is really helpful information for you to know, so you can understand your body and understand how to labor more effectively. I hope this video was helpful. Again, understand that this is ultimately your choice, but it's important for you to have this information so you can make the best decision for you and for your labor experience. Thank you guys so much. Make sure to hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, make sure to follow me. I hope this video was super helpful for you. Thank you guys, of course, for being here. Love you all, and I'm cheering for you and rooting for you to have the most empowered and beautiful birth experience that you deserve and desire.